The penultimate result was that Reagan's foreign policies and economic reforms created a condition which the USSR could not match. The global economy was US dominated, and the Soviet system, trying to compete with the false flag operation called the Star Wars program, collapsed under the weight of its own imploding economy. His legacy was being tough, his position on terrorism, support of Israel, rebuilding the military, economic reforms that corrected Carter's failures, handling of the Soviet Union, and his stemming the growth of communism in the Western Hemisphere. However, his greatest achievement was in bluffing the Soviets into spinning themselves into political and economic bankruptcy, collapsing their economy, their government, which was
This video is sponsored by Atlas VPN.
Construction. Building.
The Founding Fathers were a group of late 18th century American revolutionary leaders who united the 13 colonies, oversaw the War of Independence from Great Britain, established the United States, and crafted a framework of government for the new nation, including the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. The first Congress proposed the Bill of Rights as protection for those fearful of a strong national government. The Bill of Rights came into effect in December of 1791, after ratification by 3/4 of the state legislatures, and contains the first 10 amendments. These are considered the benchmark laws, inviolate, untouchable, and irrevocable. The most contentious throughout U.S. history is the Second Amendment. What is the Second Amendment? Why was it listed second in the 10 First Amendments? Why has it been the most contentious of all the amendments?
Construction complete.
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, a veteran of the United States Army and Marine Corps, former history professor, book author, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History.
Rolling.
Unit ready.
Loading up the belt.
Give me something to break. Woody. Give me something to break. It's clobbering time, no? Ready to crash.
Insufficient funds.
Since we're talking about freedoms and rights, you have the right to use the internet without your data being breached, and that's exactly why I wanted to talk to you about Atlas VPN, which is the best VPN deal on the market. Enjoy the most affordable online protection for just $1.83 per month, plus 3 months extra with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Atlas is more than just a VPN. It blocks all the malicious links, ads, and trackers, and notifies you when someone is trying to steal your data. Can't access your favorite shows on your Netflix while being abroad? Atlas VPN has you covered. Your catalog will be available even in countries where they may be restricted. Looking for something on Google? With Atlas VPN, you can search the web without someone tracking your activity. Atlas VPN protects all your devices with a single subscription. You can also get the best deals while shopping online, including Spotify and airlines, hotels, and more. Grab the summer deal because now Atlas VPN Premium is just $1.83 per month plus 3 months extra, and with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Protect your privacy and get many benefits of Atlas VPN for the ridiculously low price. You can take this deal by clicking this link, which will also be in the video description below. Be quick, as it is a limited time offer.
There's no violation of a Second Amendment right. We talk like there's no amendment that's absolute. When the amendment was passed, it didn't say anybody can own a gun and any kind of gun and any kind of weapon. You couldn't buy a cannon, and when this amendment was passed, there's no reason why you should be able to buy certain assault weapons. But that's another issue.
Construction complete.
The original text for the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Second Amendment was considered the second most important law in the Constitution, ratified in 1791, and was proposed by James Madison to allow the creation of civilian forces that can counteract a tyrannical federal government. Their primary reason for having the right to own guns stemmed from the colonial period when the British tried to take the guns from their American subjects. The reality that the colonies would go to war meant that every able-bodied man needed to be armed.
Complete.
The anti-federalists believed that a centralized standing military established by the Constitutional Convention gave the federal government too much power and potential for violent oppression. This meant that the citizens needed to have the right to protect themselves and their property from any future government that wanted to exercise total control over the population in violation of the law to take away the freedoms they had been guaranteed under the Constitution. Modern militias are most commonly known as State Defense Forces, or SDFs. As of 2010, 23 states and territories maintained their own SDFs. Unlike state-governed organizations such as the National Guard, which fall under the auspices of the state governors and can be federalized in times of national emergency, SDFs fall under the sole jurisdiction of state or territorial governments and cannot be commanded by the federal government. The first major challenge to the Second Amendment in New York, with the passing of the Sullivan Act, was named for its primary legislative sponsor, State Senator Timothy Sullivan, a Tammany Hall Democrat who wanted to remove all guns from New York. It went into effect on August 31st, 1911. Blankovich, in his book on New York City, writes that Big Tim was more likely influenced by a desire to have his police friends use the law to frame opponents by planting guns on them. At the time, some complained that the law would only succeed in disarming lawful citizens, while others suspected that Sullivan was just trying to rein in the thugs on his own payroll.
What is the mission?
Famous lawman Bat Masterson, a friend of Sullivan's, criticized the law as obnoxious and said that he questioned Sullivan's mental state of mind over the law. Most saw that there was no reduction in gun crime as a result, and law-abiding citizens tended to become victims more frequently, especially during home invasions. Another attack was when the federal government started regulating and keeping records of machine guns back when it was passed by the National Firearms Act of 1934. Because of their scarcity, legal machine guns are also very expensive and still require the original 1934 machine gun tax stamp of $200, and the owner or trader must undergo extensive background checks and also permit the federal government to conduct searches of a residence or a gun store. That law mandated strict guidelines for manufacturers to put them in place for owners to register their machine guns. The next great gun control measure came after the assassinations of President John Kennedy, Attorney General Robert Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. President Lyndon Baines Johnson had the Gun Control Act passed in 1968, which imposed stricter licensing and regulation on the firearms industry. The law was also passed to stop the ability of citizens from buying and receiving guns through the U.S. mail, which was done very frequently. Lee Harvey Oswald received his Mannlicher rifle that way to kill President Kennedy. The new law also established new categories of firearms offenses and prohibits the sale of firearms and ammunition to felons and certain other prohibited persons, such as illegal drug users and the mentally ill with violent tendencies. Many believe that the only reason Johnson passed the act through Congress was due to the black riots in Los Angeles and other cities, as well as the rise of black radical groups such as the Black Panthers and Simeone's Liberation Army, who used weapons in crimes. Background checks were now a part of the process. The 1968 law also imposes the first federal jurisdiction over destructive devices, including bombs, mines, grenades, and other similar devices. Congress reorganized ATU into the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax Division, or ATTD, and delegated to them the enforcement of the Gun Control Act. Today we have the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. In 1986, the federal government imposed the Firearm Owners Protection Act, which expanded on the original law. It also banned the possession and transfer of new automatic firearms and parts that fired bullets without stopping once the trigger is depressed. The act stipulated that machine guns must be manufactured before May 19, 1986, the cutoff date imposed by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and explosives, fines of up to $250,000 and prison sentences of up to 10 years can be instituted to those in possession of an unregistered machine gun.
Ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. No one needs to have a weapon that can fire over 30, 40, 50, even up to 100 rounds, unless you think the deer are wearing Kevlar vests or something.
California has always been a hotbed of gun control.
reporting
Even
east.
Republican President Ronald Reagan supported the 1967 bill when he was governor, sponsored by Republican Don Mulford in response to the Black Panthers carrying loaded weapons in public.
Construction complete.
One is to make it a misdemeanor to have loaded rifles and shotguns and weapons in public places.
Unit
The
ready.
Mulford Act was also supported by the National Rifle Association, which banned open carry of loaded weapons in the state, and the Mulford Law is still on the books in California. In 1991, Reagan supported the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, named for his press secretary, shot during the 1981 attempt on Reagan's life. That bill passed in 1993, mandating federal background checks and a 5-day waiting period. The Public Safety and Recreational Firearms Use Protection Act in 1994 followed the Mulford Act in California, which Reagan supported, and banned private use of assault weapons, such as certain semi-automatic rifles.
Construction
This
complete.
was a proposal by Democrats in Congress and signed into law by President William Jefferson Clinton.
New
This
construction
federal ban
options.
expired in 2004. Some U.S. states have laws that prohibit assault weapons, which is a vague term at best. This has also been considered unconstitutional for several reasons. First, very few anti-gun proponents can even define what an assault weapon is. Second, semi-automatic weapons include any and all weapons, whether shotguns, pistols, and non-bolt-action rifles.
Location confirmed.
All of these weapons only fire with each individual trigger pull, with the exception of double-action handguns, which are not on the ban list and yet are responsible for the most gun crimes in the nation.
Waiting orders.
In the 2008 landmark case, District of Columbia v. Heller,
Moving. Building
the U.S.
Soviet
Supreme
economy.
Court concluded
Relocating
the Second
operations.
Amendment includes the right of individuals to bear arms for
comrade.
self-defense.
Changing position.
In 2010, McDonald v. City of Chicago extended the prior ruling from federal laws to state and local
Ready,
laws.
comrade.
This opinion is
Changing
controversial
position.
among anti-gun liberals, and many argue that it conflicts with the 10th Amendment on states' rights to pass laws,
Waiting orders.
including regulating gun ownership. The current sitting
War
members of
minor
the
here.
Supreme Court,
This will show
Justices
them.
Clarence Thomas,
War
John
minor
G.
here.
Roberts Jr.,
Pride
and
of the
Samuel
Warriors.
Alito Jr.,
Protect the order.
voted
We
in the
are
majority
armed.
opinion of both
We will
District
need
of
that.
Columbia v. Heller and McDonald v. City of Chicago,
Vehicle reporting.
the two cases that collectively establish the individual's right to bear arms for self-defense.
Structure sold.
The argument
Comrade,
is
conscript
that
reporting.
despite the 10th
Order
Amendment giving
received.
states the
Waiting
rights to
orders.
pass their own laws, such as having a death penalty,
Location
no
confirmed.
law passed may usurp the federally protected rights enshrined
Conscript
in the
reporting.
Constitution, and the
Vehicle
Second Amendment
reporting.
qualifies.
Waiting order.
What the liberal
comrade.
anti-gun lobby will
Moving.
never acknowledge
Ready
is
for
that the
transport.
cities with the
Clear the
highest
air.
rates of gun crimes
Maneuvering.
are the very Democrat-run
Mobile
cities that have the most strict
construction
gun laws,
center.
leaving people defenseless
Ready,
against criminals.
comrade.
For example, some cities, such as those in
Building
conservative
Soviet
districts of
economy.
Texas, have very
Waiting
relaxed
order.
gun laws.
Waiting order.
And they have the lowest crime rates due to
clear the
guns
air.
because the responsible citizens all carry weapons. This is opposed to Democrat
Vehicle
cities such as
reporting.
Houston and Dallas,
Moving.
which have far higher
Ready,
gun
waiting
violence
order.
rates because
Changing
only
position.
criminals have guns.
Construction complete.
It would appear that criminals do not go where there are a lot of
Building
guns,
Soviet economy.
only
Looks
where
like
they
good
will
place to
be
buy.
the
Position.
only
Ready,
people with
vehicle
guns.
reporting.
The creation of gun-free zones, such as at churches and schools, have created a happy hunting ground for the mentally feeble mass shooter.
On hold.
They know that there will be
Building
little if any
Soviet
resistance
economy.
due to the law-abiding citizens not having guns.
Ready for transport.
Hardening schools, armed security, or even well-trained and armed teachers may be a solution, as our children are our most precious assets and should be protected like politicians are. The anti-gun lobby points to the many mass shootings that have taken place over the last 30 years, using those as reasons to remove Second Amendment rights for citizens to have certain types of weapons. The counter-argument is that with over 400 million weapons in the nation, if guns killed people by themselves, there would be millions of people killed every year. The fact is, they never report the fact that on the average, 2 million times per year, a legal gun owner prevents a crime with a firearm, often saving their life or someone else's. In most cases, the weapon is never fired. Just having it was a deterrent. The counter to the anti-gun logic would be better off banning cars, or at least doing background checks on car buyers who have had the same issues as potential illegal gun owners. Since automobiles kill more people every year and most die due to driver negligence. Another thing that the liberal media does not state is that most gun deaths are suicides. Arizona and North Carolina have dropped the requirements for having carry permits. The gun crime has dropped because criminals never know who may have one and know how to use it. It has been proven that homeowners with home security protection signs have far lower break-in rates than those that do not. Likewise, gun owners who advertise their willingness to defend their lives and property usually do not make news headlines. Criminals may not be smart, but few are suicidal. Another factor that the liberal media ignores that besides car accidents, more people are killed by strangulation, physical assault, and kitchen utensils, as well as hammers and screwdrivers, than with guns. But only guns make the news. In the end, the attacks upon the Second Amendment will never stop. It will take a strong judiciary in the courts to maintain the rights of Americans to keep and bear arms. Perhaps the best way to convert an anti-gun liberal into a Second Amendment supporter is to have another citizen with a gun save their life with one.
We are not finished. We are not finished. We are not finished.
Thank you for watching Forgotten History. Please click like, subscribe, and share. Send us comments and show ideas, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Until next time.
Ready, comrade. Ready, vehicle reporting. Changing position. Ready, comrade. Changing position. Reporting. Warminer here.
Unit lost.
Comrade.
Unit promoted. Our base under attack.
Comrade.
Unit promoted.
Order received.
Unit
Waiting orders.
lost.
Waiting orders. Order received.
General Secretary Gorbachev,
Reporting.
if you seek peace,
All my
if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate.
Vehicle reporting.
Mr. Gorbachev,
Location confirmed.
open this gate.
Warminer here.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down
Looks like
this
good place to
wall.
mine. We are armed.
Most people around the world
Relocating operation.
remember Ronald Reagan as the 40th American president. And many people remember him as an actor turned politician and a former governor of California.
Waiting orders.
But many people do not
Waiting
know
orders.
his military background,
Changing
nor
position.
his many accomplishments, including collapsing the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact. That seemed to go unheralded during his 2 terms in office and are even little known today. Who was the real Ronald Reagan? What made him change parties from Democrat to Republican? How did he facilitate the end of the Cold War? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, a veteran of the United States Army and Marine Corps, former history professor, book author, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History.
Construction complete. Select
Let's clear the air. Getting in closer.
Unit ready. Building.
Waiting orders. Ready for transport. Ready for transport.
Ronald Reagan was born in very humble circumstances on February 6, 1911, in Tampico, Illinois.
Black away.
He attended Eureka College in Eureka, Illinois, where he played gridiron football and was active in the Drama Society, but earned only passing grades. A popular student, he was elected class president in his senior year and graduated in 1932 with a BA in social sciences and economics. And then he moved to Iowa to become a radio sports announcer. A screen test in 1937 won him a contract in Hollywood, and over the next several decades, he rose to prominence as a film actor, appearing in 53 films. His fame as an actor before and during World War II in the U.S. Army Air Forces was both a benefit and a curse for Ronald Reagan, because he wanted to go overseas and serve like other celebrities, but fate would intervene. The Pentagon had Reagan continue to work in the film industry back home while in uniform. He appeared in patriotic films like Jet Zero and Forgotten Country, both produced in 1943, and doing 300 propaganda and training films. He left the service at war's end as a captain. In 1949, Ronald Reagan divorced his first wife, the actress Jane Wyman, and married Nancy Davis in 1952. After 6 years as president of the Screen Actors Guild, serving intermittently between 1947 and 1960, in 1962 Reagan switched his party affiliation from Democrat to Republican. His own personal views and philosophy did not coincide with the more radical movement of the majority of Democrats who still supported racial segregation and tolerated the KKK, especially in the South. Reagan did not believe in cradle-to-grave welfare, as he believed that it killed the initiative of people to try and strive, work hard, and make their own lives better without the government. Reagan, the Republican, was elected governor of California on November 5, 1966, and then re-elected on November 5, 1970, serving until 1975. His next step was being elected as the 40th President of the United States in 1980. At the age of 69 in 1981 and age 73 in 1985, Reagan was at that time the oldest man ever elected president when he defeated Democratic incumbent James Earl Carter in the previous election with 50.7% of the votes. Reagan was not cold. He was taken very seriously by lawmakers, and one of the immediate results was the release of the 52 American hostages held in Iran for 444 days. Reagan warned the Ayatollah Khomeini that this was a new administration. Unlike the feckless Carter, he let the Iranians know that he would take action. The difference was demonstrable. Within hours of Reagan taking the oath of office, the hostages were in fact released. On March 30th, 1981, 69 days after Reagan's inauguration on January 20th, John Hinckley Jr. attempted to assassinate the president outside the Washington Hilton Hotel. Reagan was shot under the left arm, the bullet lodging in his lung, and missed his heart by less than 1 inch. On August 3, 1981, 13,000 members of the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization, or PATCOS, walked off the job in a nationwide strike. 2 days later, Reagan announced that they were in violation of legislation prohibiting strikes by government employees because of public safety policies, and if they did not report to work within 48 hours, their jobs would be terminated. Only 1,300 returned to their jobs. The rest were, in fact, terminated, and the impact saw major strikes plummet from an average of 300 strikes each year in previous decades to fewer than 30 by 2006. While many labor leaders disliked Reagan, especially after he acquired the air traffic controllers, he was very popular with labor union members for his protectionist approach to American workers keeping their jobs versus foreign labor. On August 19, 1981, Ronald Reagan fulfilled his campaign pledge to appoint the first woman to the Supreme Court by nominating Sandra Day O'Connor to replace Justice Paula Stewart. Congress confirmed O'Connor's appointment on September 21, 1981 by a vote of 99-0. Reagan was a national America First hawk, and he maintained a firm stance against terrorism, exemplified by the American retaliation against Libya for an air attack in 1981. He had put the world on notice. When Ronald Reagan took office, the U.S. economy had 9% inflation with 20% interest rates. To combat these effects, Reagan established what became to be known as Reaganomics. Economic policies that included increased defense spending, lowering personal income taxes, reducing spending on social services, and decreased business regulation. He also tightened regulations on foreign workers' visas to protect American jobs. In the fall of 1981, due to the fiscal mismanagement of the previous administration, the cascade effect of liberal fiscal mismanagement finally caught up, and the U.S. economy took a turn for the worse. The Federal Reserve increased interest rates to combat the 14% inflation rate. By November 1982, unemployment reached 10.8%. Thousands of businesses failed, farmers lost their lands, and many sick, elderly, and poor became homeless. The official unemployment rate reached 11.5 million in January 1983, and Reagan's disapproval rating rose to 50%, from a low of only 18% in early 1981. Although inflation had dropped from 13.5% in 1980 to 5.1% in 1982, a severe recession set in, with unemployment exceeding 10% in October 1982 for the first time in 40 years. In response, Reagan lowered interest rates, passed legislation such as the Economic Recovery Tax Act of 1981, which included the largest tax cuts in the post-World War II period. And later, he passed the Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act of 1982 and the Tax Reform Act of 1986. As a result, the top marginal tax rate on individual income was reduced from 70% to 28%, and the overall tax code was restructured. He signed the Free Trade Agreement with Canada, which evolved into the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA. The economy began to rise as a result of consumer spending, and domestic revenues increased. In Beirut, Lebanon, October 23, 1983, a suicide bomber drove his truck into the U.S. Marine barracks, killing 241 Marines. This tragedy caused Reagan to reevaluate the placement of the Marines as a part of the multinational peacekeeping force during the Lebanese Civil War. Combined with previous and repetitive operations, Reagan's peacekeeping force was withdrawn from war-torn Lebanon. Reagan paid his respects to the families of those Marines at Camp Lejeune when the Beirut Memorial was built in 1986. Soon after his arrival, it started to rain very hard, and the crowd assembled. Widows, siblings, comrades, family members, and children, they were not undercover. Reagan was offered an umbrella by the Secret Service, but he stated, and was clearly overheard, "No, these people do not have one, so I do not know." And he delivered a heartfelt speech to those in attendance. This was one of the many occasions when he made a very well-known remark. Quote, "Some people wonder if they ever make a difference. Marines do not have that problem." End quote. Reagan led the battle for a Social Security reform bill designed to ensure long-term solvency of the system, and oversaw the passage of immigration reform legislation, as well as the expansion of the Medicare program to protect the elderly and disabled against catastrophic health costs. Reagan consistently received very high approval ratings. He was not popular with some minority groups, particularly African Americans, many of whom did not benefit from the economic prosperity. In 1986, over 30% of the black population had an income below the official poverty level, much of it due to the growth of technology-based employment. Reagan encouraged the development of private sector initiatives, as well as federalism, allowing the 10th Amendment to be unfettered by federal government, giving states far more flexibility with regard to business practices. The objective of transferring from the federal government some of the responsibilities to the states was believed to be a better served operation where private business was concerned at the state and local levels. On March 8, 1983, Reagan gave what became known as his Evil Empire speech that warned against ignoring the aggressive impulses of an evil empire, the USSR. On March 23rd, President Reagan announced the creation of the Strategic Defense Initiative, or SDI, nicknamed Star Wars, which was a proposed space-based defense system intended to deter an attack on the U.S. by intercepting Soviet nuclear intercontinental ballistic missiles. In actuality, Star Wars was a diversion operation to force the Soviets to spend money they did not have to counter the potential American invasion to space, which was not even a project. On October 25, 1983, 1,900 U.S. forces invaded the small island nation of Cuba over safety concerns for American medical students in the country and to remove a recent Cuban-inspired coup. Reagan had openly demonstrated his willingness to eliminate the spread of communism. The United Nations condemned the invasion, but widely supported by many Americans. The U.S. accomplished its military objective. The students came home unharmed, and the communist government was deposed. In 1984, Reagan won his second term by a landslide of 58.8% of the votes against Democratic challenger Walter Mondale, with Reagan receiving 525 electoral votes, the most of any presidential candidate, and winning every state except Minnesota. On April 15, 1986, to emphasize his position on terrorism, Reagan launched Operation El Dorado Canyon. This was a long-distance air raid to hit targets in Libya for the deaths of American soldiers in the La Belle discotheque in West Berlin. His target was Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi had earlier indicated that he would continue to support the active terrorist groups such as the West German Red Army faction, the Italian-based Red Brigades, and the Irish Republican Army. Still, foreign policy was his strong suit. Between November 19, 1985 and December 8, 1987, President Reagan met with Mikhail Gorbachev, Secretary General of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, at 4 summits to discuss their respective countries' bilateral arms race. The meetings culminated in the December 8, 1987 signing of the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which required the elimination of all intermediate-range ground-launched missiles. On November 25, 1986, Attorney General Edwin Meese publicly confirmed that $10 to $30 million of profits from the sale of U.S. arms to Iran had been diverted to anti-communist guerrilla Nicaraguan Contras. National Security Advisor Admiral John Poindexter then resigned, and National Security Aide Marine Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North was fired, both for their involvement in what became known as the Iran-Contra affair. Reagan claimed that he did not learn of the Iran-Contra diversion until Meese told him about it on November 4, 1986. In February 26, 1987, the Tower Commission's report found no evidence linking Reagan to the event. However, the report did determine that Reagan's hands-off policies among the government agencies led to the actions of his administration. On June 12, 1987, Reagan delivered a famous address in West Berlin at the Brandenburg Gate, which had separated communist East Berlin from democratic West Berlin since 1961. This was one of the many classic speeches he gave that earned him the nickname of the Great Communicator. He always spoke clearly, directly, and rarely used a script or deviated from his message. Whomever he spoke to never left the meeting not knowing his intentions or exactly where his mind was on any given subject. During his 2 terms in office, Reagan continually tried to balance the budget by cutting federal spending. He cut the budgets of many federal departments, including the Department of Housing and Urban Development by 40%, the Department of Transportation by 18%, the Department of Education by 19%, the Department of Commerce by 32%, and the Department of Agriculture by 24%. Reagan never cut the budgets for the Departments of Defense, Health and Human Services, Department of Justice, or Department of State. The penultimate result was that Reagan's foreign policies and economic reforms created a condition which the USSR could not match. The global economy was US dominated, and the Soviet system, trying to compete with the false flag operation called the Star Wars program, collapsed under the weight of its own imploding economy. His legacy was being tough, his position on terrorism, support of Israel, rebuilding the military, economic reforms that corrected Carter's failures, handling of the Soviet Union, and his stemming the growth of communism in the Western Hemisphere. However, his greatest achievement was in bluffing the Soviets into spinning themselves into political and economic bankruptcy, collapsing their economy, their government, which resulted in the former Warsaw Pact nations also falling apart, or becoming free and independent nations for the first time in their histories. Reagan's true legacy was that he liberated nearly 100 million people alive today. In 1993, Reagan experienced recurring episodes of confusion and forgetfulness and was diagnosed as having Alzheimer's disease. He disclosed his condition in a November 5, 1994 letter to the American people, hoping to promote greater awareness of this condition. Ronald Reagan died on June 5, 2004 in Los Angeles, California.
Waiting order. Location confirmed. Vehicle reporting.
Thanks for watching today's episode of Forgotten History. If you like this episode, please consider becoming a channel member or joining our Patreon page. This would help us cost of production.
You are victorious. You are victorious.
As always, please like, share, and comment. And if you have any show ideas, please contact us, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Until next time.